Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses. So if you're Jewish, forget about Moses, and that they ought not to circumcise their children nor walk according to customs. So you're teaching the Jews that once you get saved, you should just forget about the Old Testament. That's the lie. That's not really what Paul was saying. That's not really what Paul was saying. But that's what they thought Paul was saying. For example, I teach against tradition. But I also say there are some traditions that God may institute. I'm not saying traditions are bad. They're only bad when God tells us to do something else, but we use the tradition as an excuse not to do what God is telling us to do. That's when you have to get rid of the tradition. Because now it's stopping you, right? So I'm not saying everything we did in the past was bad. It was not bad. It was wonderful for its time. But there are things that God wants to do differently. And he says, I can't put new wine into the old wineskin. But I gave you that old wineskin for a purpose. But now that I'm going to do something new, I got to rip up the old wineskin and get rid of that. Because you can't mix them. We keep trying to mix old and new. And we have to totally let go of the old.
So is that a fear?
Is that a what?
That's a fear then.
Yes. Yes. Every time you make a comment, it is correct. It's a correct observation. That is, people are afraid to let go of the old. So, but I'm not saying everything old is bad. But sometimes people, that's what they hear. And with Paul, he wasn't saying that Moses was bad. He was just saying that was for a time period. The law was for a time period, and now God wants his new covenant. So here's what Paul said about the circumcision. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 18 through 20.
Was anyone called while circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. Was anyone called while uncircumcised? Let him not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. But keeping the commandments of God is what matters.
So let's go back. So if anyone was called while you were circumcised, meaning while you were Jewish and you were circumcised, is that when God called you? Then don't become uncircumcised. How are you going to reverse that? Good luck. Was anyone called while uncircumcised? Well, don't become circumcised because you're 50 years old now and you won't get over that very quickly. So he's saying don't change, if you were this, that's fine, because it doesn't matter. Circumcision is not what matters. He says it's keeping God's commandments. What he's telling you to do is what matters. Circumcision had its purpose. But Abraham wasn't circumcised until after he believed God. He believed God and counted him for righteousness. His righteousness came from his belief. And the circumcision was the seal, was the sign for that generation that they had a covenant with God. But that's no longer the sign for that's not what we need anymore. Jesus on the cross is now the sign of our covenant. So we don't need to be circumcised, right? That's not what seals it up. So if you were circumcised, that's fine. If you weren't, that's fine. He says I'm not asking you to change because it doesn't matter. We do that with baptism today. Baptism does not save anybody. Your belief in God saves you, and then the baptism is a sign for you that, okay, I was dead and now I'm alive, and you're buried. But that's not what saves you. If you weren't baptized, you're still saved. If you were baptized, that's fine. That's not what saves you. Baptism doesn't save you. Yes?
It's symbolic to that though, but at the same token, when you do get baptized, my opinion, I feel that now that you get baptized, it's a slippery slope.
I don't know what you mean by that. No, I'm saying I don't know what you mean.
Things come at you different now. If you got baptized, you're no longer that person. So now you killed the old person.
Right.
The new person. So now the tricks that used to fall, those tricks don't work no more. It's new things that come into your life.
Right. But it wasn't the baptism that did it. It was faith in God.
I'm saying the faith you have once you get baptized, that's symbolic to you changing yourself.
Right. So,
I don't think this is.
yeah, I understand you. So I just want to make sure you understand me. That your faith in Christ is what changed everything, and the baptism was just the symbol of it. Right. But you're using the word baptism, you mean to be saying it's your belief. Everything has changed now that you believe, not now that you're baptized. It's changed now that you're baptized.
Baptism was symbolic.
It's symbolic,
It's
right.
changing and killing.
And now that you
person.
believe.
But that new person now has different adversities.
Right, that's
So
true.
the old things that used to entice you are no longer.
Hopefully. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, but wouldn't baptism be the Spirit, baptism into the Holy Spirit?
Well, now you're trying to get into the Father, Son, Spirit.
Okay. I just didn't.
Yes, stop. Okay, so the Bible says the doctrine of baptisms with an S. So there are different types of baptisms. But I was talking about water baptism. I'm just saying, we worry people sometimes. Oh, you haven't been baptized yet? You better go get baptized, as though the baptism is what saved them or didn't save them. So you can make somebody think, oh my God, all those years I wasn't even saved because I wasn't baptized. And he's saying, circumcision is nothing, baptism, that's not what saves you, it's your belief that saves you. So sure, get baptized because that's good for you. I'm talking about water baptism. That's good symbolically for you. But if you aren't baptized, if you haven't been baptized, that's okay. If you have been baptized, that's okay. It's your faith that matters. And that's what he's saying the same thing about circumcision. I'm just using baptism as a sign for circumcision. Yes, sir.
This two statements, faith and baptism, faith and belief goes hand in hand. And the water baptism is just outwardly what goes on inside of you, because you're baptized with the Spirit.
Right, it's an outward sign of what's going on inside. But if you have not been baptized, if you got saved and you haven't been baptized, you're still saved. Baptism does not save you. Your faith saves you. Your faith saves you. There's no work that we can do that will save us. No work that we can do will save us. Amen. Jesus' work saves us. Amen. Period. So baptism doesn't save you. Circumcision doesn't save you. None of those things save you. Only faith in Christ. There are people who did not believe in Christ and give their lives to him, but they got baptized.
Yeah, I was
They are
there.
not saved because they never gave their heart to the Lord, but they think they're saved because someone sprinkled them or dunked them. So they were a devil, they came out as wet devil. They never gave their life to the Lord. But we put so much emphasis on baptism that we think, well, you're saved now. No, you're not unless you gave them your heart. And Paul's saying the same thing about circumcision. There are a lot of people circumcised that they don't believe. Circumcision is nothing, he says. Uncircumcision is nothing. What matters is your faith.
So I'll say this, when you give yourself to Christ.
Yes.
And you are baptized with the Spirit, you're baptized with the Spirit. The water baptism doesn't mean nothing. It's just
It's a
an
symbol.
outward
Right, it's an outward symbol,
symbol.
right. And it's good to do
of what
what we
goes
like
on
to do.
the inside of you.
Right. But we just don't want to emphasize baptism so much that people think that that's what saves you.
Amen.
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
at the same time, Jesus was baptized, so baptism does mean something. You know.
I didn't say it doesn't mean anything. I didn't say it doesn't mean anything. It's symbolic.
Hold up.
But if you aren't baptized, you can still be saved. I understand, but if you accept Jesus as your Lord and on your way to the church, you get in a car accident, don't tell that mama her child never got saved because he never got in the water. Because water doesn't save you. Jesus saves you.
Amen.
Amen.
You Baptists? That's what Paul's getting in trouble for right now. Circumcision doesn't save you. But you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying it's not what saves you.
Right, right.
But people have been depressed for years because their baby never got to the water before my baby died. And they think their baby's in hell. Because they think the water is what would have saved their child. You understand? We don't want to teach that it's the water that saves you. It's just an act that we are encouraged to do because for us, it helps us truly understand what happened. But it doesn't help God understand what happened.
And Jesus was walking with, God for over 30 years before he got baptized. It's not like he was ever.
No, Jesus was not saved until he got baptized. Jesus was on his way to hell. Thank God he finally got baptized. When Jesus showed up to get baptized, John said, no, you should baptize me. You don't need to get baptized. And he said, let's do all to fulfill the law of the prophets. Let's do the traditions so people don't get upset.
Right.
But Jesus knew he wasn't going to be baptized. I think the water didn't do anything. He said, we need to fulfill the law of the prophets. We need to do that. So people don't get upset about it. Yes, ma'am.
If you know the word of God, because we like being this horse, I'm so sorry.
A dead horse?
The dead horse, yes. If you know the word of God, you know that when Jesus was dying and there were the two thieves that were on the side of him, and they said, remember me, you know, when you get into your kingdom.
Right.
And he said, and Jesus said, this day you will be with me
In paradise.
In
He didn't get a chance to jump off the cross and get baptized.
No,
He didn't get a chance.
no.
He didn't go to hell. Because it's his faith. But I'm not. But again, this is excellent, because this is exactly what Paul was going through. This helps us understand it. Because it can sound like you're saying exactly what it sounded like. Well, you're saying all baptism is bad. And that's what they thought Paul was saying.
Yeah.
He's just saying, he's saying, if you've been circumcised, great. If you haven't been circumcised, that's fine. Because really, that's not what saves you. But if that's what you've been born into, and that's fine. So if you've been baptized, excellent. Because it helps you. It's a good experience to have because it helps you to understand outwardly what's going on inwardly. Because we don't see the Spirit. So that experience really helps you to, when you come out of that water, you go, oh, I get it now. Right? You don't have to lay hands on somebody for God to heal them. But that helps that person feel like God is touching them. But it's not the hand that heals them. They can be healed without you doing that. But there are things that God has instituted that help us understand what's going on. Yes.
I just want to say that if all that is true, the hand, the baptism, the circumcision, if that's just to help us here,
Yes.
but it's not getting you to where you need to go, then why is it actually done in the churches if that's not the actual truth?
No, because it does help us. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying it helps us understand what's going
But
on.
isn't that still kind of like misleading or misguiding?
Well,
Or to
if we
understand?
emphasize it too much, it can be misleading.
Yeah.
If we emphasize it too much, if we act like, if we tell people, you have to be baptized. Well, no, you don't have to be. We would encourage you to be because it will help you. But we
Because for
sometimes,
many years, I thought when I got baptized that I was good to go. And then I found out, I was good to go, but then I found out that you had to,
accept Christ.
yeah.
Right, see? And so this is
And
an
that
example.
happened, and this is like almost 50 years ago that I got baptized.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. So he got baptized, but he hadn't accepted Christ.
No.
But he thought, oh, good. Then that's why you live the life that you live.
Yeah.
Because, well, I'm good, I'm in. Because I was baptized. Because you can accidentally preach it as though that's what saves you.
Yeah.
So we just have to be careful how we deliver messages. Because people will think that that's what saves you. We're Baptists, so we're way into baptism. All right, we're good people. Like, there's so much more to talk about. But that's good. That's what we're here to learn. So it's good. If you can help somebody.
Along the way.
Yes. Okay, so Paul said, circumcision is nothing, uncircumcision is nothing, but keeping commandments of God is what matters. Verse 20, 1 Corinthians chapter 7.
Let each one remain in the same calling in which he was called.
So, if you're Jewish, stay Jewish, just become a Jewish Christian. If you're Gentile, stay Gentile, become a Gentile Christian. Say, I'm not trying to pull you out of something and into something else. But just know that what matters is your faith. Is your faith. Romans chapter 4, verse 11.
And he received the sign of circumcision, a seal of the righteousness of the faith, which he had while still uncircumcised.
Who's the he?
Paul.
Good guess. Abraham, right. Abraham received a sign of circumcision. It's a seal of the righteousness of the faith which he had while still uncircumcised. Go on.
That he might be the father of all those who believe, though they are uncircumcised, that righteousness might be imputed to them also.
So he got the sign of the circumcision which was a seal of the righteousness that he had while he was uncircumcised. So while he was uncircumcised, God told him, you're righteous, so that he can be the father of those who believe, not the father of those who are circumcised. He's not the father of those who are circumcised. Abraham is the father of all those who believe. That's why we call him our father. We say, Father Abraham, and his son, and I'm one of them because I believe. So he's not the father of the circumcised, he's the father of those who believe. He's not the father of baptism, he's the father of those who believe. That's what's important. Okay. So that righteousness will be imputed to them also, to the people who just believe, whether you're Gentile or Jew. That's why God did it in that order on purpose, so that we understand. Here's what righteousness comes from: faith. And then you are free, we are free to then be baptized. You can do whatever thing is going to help you enrich your faith. But understand that it's belief that does it. Okay, Galatians chapter 2, verse 3.
Yet not even Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised.
So remember that Titus was Greek, and when he was traveling with Paul, they tried to get Paul to circumcise him. And Paul says, no, I'm not going to circumcise him. I don't want to set a bad example, make you think everybody needs to be circumcised, so I'm not circumcising Titus. So that's why people were mad at Paul. Okay, look at Acts chapter 16, verse 3.
I wanted to have him, Timothy, go on with him, and he took him and circumcised him because of the Jews who were in that region, for they all knew that his father was Greek.
So Timothy's father was Greek, but Timothy's mother was Jewish. So, okay, Timothy, I am going to circumcise you because your mother's Jewish, and they're not going to receive from you. They're not going to listen to you as long as they know you're uncircumcised. Now, Timothy had been ministering with Paul for a long time, so circumcision wasn't saving him. He'd been saved. But he knew that those people are not going to receive unless you're circumcised. So that's bad on them. But Paul thought, why have a big fight with him? Titus, he can argue, well, he's Gentile, but Timothy, you're Jewish, so if I don't circumcise you, then there's going to be no reason for us to go down there because they're going to shut their ears to everything you're saying because they think circumcision is what saves you because they haven't read the Bible well enough. So that is all of us. We are guilty in the church of knowing sermons word for word, but not the Bible word for word. And sometimes sermons are inaccurate. Never on purpose, well, for the most part, not on purpose. You know what I'm saying? Not on purpose, but there's certain things we teach and we teach and we teach and we teach inaccurately, and we know them really well. But we don't know the Bible, because reading the Bible, the Bible's very clear. That's what it's confusing to me. Because the Bible's so clear, so I'm like, why do you believe that? That's crazy. Have you not read the Bible? Well, no, I have not. But they've heard thousands of sermons.
So what, we stuck on the past now as opposed to focusing on?
We're just stuck on what people say instead
That's
of
what I'm
reading
saying.
for
I said we
ourselves.
focus on the past now instead of being focused on what's in the scripture.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So all the hours we spend going to different services, we should spend them in the Bible. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You were talking about sermons, like we hear some sermons that people add things and so forth and so on, like the moon drifted away in blood. It didn't say that. So we study to show ourselves approved.
Right. Yeah, we need to read this. We've got to be really clear on what the Bible says. Okay. Now, Acts chapter 21, verse 22 through 24. So just to remind us, they're telling Paul, these Jews are mad at you because they think that you teach that circumcision is bad and baptism is bad. I'm not teaching baptism is bad, but it sounds like it. So these Jews are all mad at you. So he has a plan. James has a plan. So this is James's plan. Go ahead and just reading.
What then the assembly must certainly meet, for they will hear that you have come. Therefore, do what we tell you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow.
So here's his plan to keep Paul from getting in trouble. Can you keep Paul from getting in trouble? No. God's already told Paul, you're going to get in trouble. So James is actually out of God's will in trying to rescue Paul. You can be out of God's will trying to save somebody that God's already told had a certain thing for them, and you're trying to avert it. Okay, here's what you need to do. And And we have a plan that will save somebody, and it's not gonna save them, because God already has another plan that's gonna supersede our plan. So James, who doesn't know the Spirit of God that well, even though he's Jesus' brother, here's the plan that he's laying out for Paul to avoid getting in trouble. Okay, so there are 4 men who have taken a vow. What vow do you think this is? What vow have we been studying every so often? The Nazarite vow, right? The Nazarite vow, where you shave your head, and you refuse to, no, I'm sorry. You refuse, you don't shave your head. Thank you. See, she doesn't want to go to me. Okay. But do not shave your head you're not going to shave your head for a long time. Like Samson, let your head just grow. God cut his hair down. It's power. So, because when you shave your head in those days, you were putting, there's somebody, they have little cute scissors? No. They had an axe, and so you had to lay back and let somebody cut your head, and you're putting your life in somebody's hands. So you say, I'm not going to do that. My life is only in God's hands. I'm not going to put my life in anybody else's hands. I'm not going to shave my head. And then at a certain time, after 30 days or 60 days, then you would shave your head. So these 4 men have taken a vow. Now go on to verse 24.
Take them and be purified with them, and pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads, and that all may know that those things of which they were informed concerning you are nothing, but that you yourself also walk orderly and keep the law.
So he said, be purified with them, Paul. Now they had been 30 days, 6 days, however long they'd already been taking their vow. And then there's a week-long purification thing where you announce everybody, in the next 7 days, I'm going to get my head shaved, and then my time will be up. So you always go to the temple and you announce it. So they said to Paul, be purified with them. You can jump in on their 7 days. Now there's a way that they figured out how to do this, because you think, well, Paul hadn't, how can he just jump in on their thing? So here's the trick. Okay, in Numbers chapter 6, verse 5 and 9.
All the days of the vow of his separation, no razor shall come upon his head until the days are fulfilled for which he separated himself to the Lord. He shall be holy.
Now here's the one exception.
And if anyone dies very suddenly beside him, and he defiles his consecrated head, then he shall shave his head on the day of his cleansing. On the 7th day he shall shave it.
So if you touch a dead body, if somebody dies suddenly around you, and you catch them, and oh no, you now touched a dead body, and they thought you were unclean. Because when people would die, they didn't embalm them right. People would die, just in general in life, and they didn't understand the corruption that was slowly happening to the body, right? So you might come a month later and touch a dead person and move them and not realize that you had picked up germs. So God would say, don't touch a dead body, period. Because that way, if you just don't touch it, you don't have to worry about it, right? So, but they would take dead bodies. It could be 6 days later, 8 days later. They didn't have all the cleansing stuff, and they didn't understand germs. Germs was a new thing. Like I to this day don't understand germs. If I dropped some Cheetos on the ground and ate them instantly. My pastrami, I don't understand. Yes, there's a 5-second rule.
Never.
I had a box of Kentucky Fried Chicken that bottom was so greasy, and I walked across the parking lot and it dropped on the ground.
Ooh.
And there were teenagers around me. And I looked at them and said, 5, 4, 3, and they grabbed that chicken, ate it. Cars had driven on that parking lot. It was a parking lot. But you can't see the germs, they don't exist. So they didn't understand germs. That's the only reason why you would do that, because you don't know what's a germ. So God had to say, don't touch dead bodies. So if somebody suddenly dies, and you touch that dead body, then you can declare your time over. Okay, even though I was fasting, I'm going to shave my head right now, because there might be germs in my head. I'm going to shave it right now, and I got 7 days. And that's my purification. So they said, Paul, just pretend like you touched something dead, basically. You know, just pretend, and you can just jump in and declare your purification because, you know, you touch Gentiles or whatever you touched. That's what he's saying, basically. Just jump in on their purification for 7 days, and then people will see, oh, you still believe in the Bible. You're doing the Nazarite vow. It's okay, right? That's what James is telling Paul. Okay, I'll go with this tradition because it makes you feel good. So, verse 26.
Then Paul took them in, and the next day, having been purified with them, entered the temple to announce the expiration of the days of purification, at which time an offering should be made for each one of them.
Right, so he's going to help them get an offering, because once you finish your vow, the church will give an offering for you, because, you know, you've given yourself to the ministry. However, verse 27.
Now, when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd.
So it ended up being the exact opposite. Now they knew where Paul was, and they've been waiting for him because he had to go to the temple and announce, hey, in 7 days I'll be back, and we're going to purify ourselves. So the Jews who Paul was trying to avoid for 5 chapters now knew where Paul was. And the very thing that James thought was going to save him. Right.
Yeah.
The very thing that James thought would save Paul ended up getting him in trouble. That is us.
That's us.
That's us.
Yeah.
Because,
That work you got booked on.
but listen, the point is that we think we can avoid God.
Yeah.
We can avoid trouble. We can avoid certain things. Instead of saying, okay, Lord, what is your plan? We just come up with a plan. Oh, I know how to get around this, how to get around that. And didn't work at all. And this is Jesus' brother, who's trying to do a good thing, but the good thing would have been ask God what to do, because certain things you can't avoid. You think you can avoid that. But God's saying, no, you're going to have to walk through that fire.
Amen.
You can't avoid it. And the very thing you do to try to get out, you end up right in it. You did not save yourself. If there's a lesson that God wants you to learn, He's going to make you learn it. You can't skip it. If there's somebody you're supposed to forgive, if there's something you're supposed to do, He'll just put you in that person's face. You move to another city and run into that person. Because you can't avoid God. Remember when the children of Israel were supposed to cross over into the promised land? But they came back and said they're giants. So they thought they could avoid the giants. But 100 years later, there's Goliath right in front of them. The grandchild of those giants that they're trying to, and you can't avoid Goliath. If God sent you, you got to face him. So James thought, oh, we can get around this. But it would have been better just to get in tune with God's plan. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and if they would have fought the giants right then, it would have been overdone with. But it got worse and worse and worse because they didn't do what God told them to when they told them. So if you delay, sometimes it's a lot harder to do it later, than if you just did it when God said. It would have been,
Right.
It would have taken care of everything. But later, now you have to suffer a lot more, and it's a lot harder.
There are always consequences for our delay. But we can't avoid God. God's will is going to be done. God's will is going to be done. So you think you can avoid this and avoid that and avoid this. You can't. His will is going to be done. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I wanted to go back to kind of connects with the will of God. When she mentioned that Jesus was baptized and he said something about the prophets to satisfy the prophecies or whatever.
Yes.
So one thing that helped me when I became, I was always Christian, but it's like what helped me understand Jesus was seeing that this stuff was prophesied before.
Right.
Right? So I had gotten some chronological Bible, I lost it, but I had a chronological Bible that showed me, okay, this was said so many hundred years ago.
Right.
So in Isaiah 40, it says that there was prophesying about John the Baptist, basically living out in the desert, basically baptizing people.
Right.
And so Jesus had to get baptized by John to show that prophecy was coming into effect, to show that Jesus was coming, that the Messiah was coming. So
Right.
that's why he only got baptized because it was supposed to happen, because that was God's will, because it was prophesied so long ago.
Right. Because they said, is Elijah coming? Once Elijah comes, then that's also the sign that the Messiah is coming. And they say John is the type of Elijah. He's that Elijah that was prophesied. So he's fulfilling a prophecy. That's why he told them, no, you have to baptize me so people can know that I'm the Messiah. not because I need to get saved. Because we hope Jesus was already saved. We're hoping that Jesus was saved. So the point of this lesson again is God had already spoken to Paul what he was going to do, and God speaks to all of us what he's going to do. We just have to learn to listen, and we hear him more often than we think. You know, and a lot of times if you're doing God's will, you don't get a stop sign, so you think you haven't heard it, but you have. You know, so God doesn't have to. The obedient child, the one that's doing okay, you don't have to say, hey, stop that, because they're doing what's right. So we think, wow, God didn't speak to me today. But he did. And you were following him. And at the end of the day, you might think, oh, I hope, but you were following his voice. Does that make sense? And so we think we aren't. We think we aren't. Because we want it to be more spectacular. But it's just going to be that still small voice on the inside. And you cannot avoid God. Yes, sir.
God talked to me 3 times in one night by stopping me from doing what I would always do, drive fast and change lanes. Right? It was 1 o'clock in the morning. I was trying to get home, but I wanted to get to bed. I didn't want to go to sleep on the wheel. And so every time I tried to change the lane, the freeway was actually basically clear except for a few cars, so I could easily do that without worrying. But a car in the other lane decided to change lanes for no reason, because I knew there was nothing in front of me. He just changed. So I said, okay, no big deal. And later on I tried it again, and another car for no reason changed and blocked me again. By the 3rd time I said, oh, he probably wants me to slow down. And I slowed down, and the same thing. Later on there was an accident further up ahead.
Right.
But I kept my pace. But sometimes we're so hard-headed, God just has to keep slapping you until you finally figure, oh, you know.
Right.
And so that's.
He's always speaking through circumstances.
So he's telling me no, 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 and I didn't know it.
Right. Yeah, he's always speaking. God's always speaking to us. So just know that God is always speaking to you all day long. You don't have to wait 40 days and do all sorts of stuff to get him to speak. We just have to do things so that we can hear. But he is speaking through circumstances, through teaching, through the word, through still small voice, through those gifts of the Spirit. I'll give you like a list one time. He is speaking. And he will get the message to you. And if you don't hear it, he'll still get you the message. You'll end up in God's will. Because they try to avoid God's will, right? God's will was for Paul to get bound at that point. And they thought they could avoid it, and they still ended up in the middle of it. So we don't have to live in fear. What if I miss God's will? You're going to end up in it. You can end up in it dragging and kicking, and you end up in it. Or you can follow it nicely. But you will still end, God's will be done. Yes, sir?
Isaiah 55:11. It says, so shall my word be that go forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void.
Right.
But it shall accomplish that whereunto I sent it.
Exactly. Thank you for that. That's a good word to hear.
Just a reminder, you say you have to do certain things to hear the voice, so you just say what the thing
Well, bless your heart. I know, she didn't, reading the word, praying, talking to God, helps you hear his voice. I said the things that block you, and Wednesday night Bible study, we're going through this. The things that block you, unforgiveness can block you from hearing God's voice. Judging will block you from hearing God's voice. Worry will block you from hearing God's voice.
Yeah.
Not doing what God tells you when he does it.
When he tell you.
When he tells you, will stop you from hearing God's voice. There's certain things that will stop you because they clog up your mind. They clog up your minds in other thoughts other than his will. But don't worry, we'll keep talking about this. We're going to be a church that hears God. We're going to walk into our mental. One thing I know about those people, they hear the voice of God. That's who we are. That's who we're going to be. Okay, just first we're going to bow our heads and just pray. Father, we just